To really understand one of the biggest power plays on the global stage, we're going to look at a scenario that feels like it's been ripped straight out of a Hollywood political thriller. It's a story that, while it is a hypothetical, reveals a hidden truth about what really runs the world.
So let's just start with a crazy question. What if one country's military just rolled into another sovereign nation, grabbed its sitting president, and flew him home to lock him up in jail? I mean, that sounds impossible, right? Like something that just couldn't happen?
Well, this exact scenario, the hypothetical capture of Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro, is the key to understanding a much, much deeper conflict. So let's walk through this movie-like story because it's going to show us what this is really all about. Okay, so the story goes like this. U.S. Special Forces storm the presidential palace in Venezuela. They arrest President Maduro, and then they put him on a plane, flying him directly to a U.S. prison. An absolutely stunning, almost unbelievable sequence of events. And what you've got to understand is just how insane this is. This kind of action against a head of state, it's almost unheard of unless you're in a full-blown, officially declared war. It just shatters all the normal rules of how countries are supposed to interact. All right, so in a situation like this, how on earth would a move this dramatic be explained to the rest of the world? You'd need a pretty compelling reason, right? Let's look at the official justification that's presented in the story. Well, the justification is actually pretty simple and incredibly direct. The argument goes that Maduro isn't a legitimate world leader. He's a criminal, a drug dealer who is actively causing harm to the United States. So you see, this isn't an act of war. No, it's a law enforcement action. It's about taking down a corrupt regime to, save the Venezuelan people. But come on, like any good story, there's always that question nagging you, right? Is the official explanation the real reason, or is there something else going on here, just beneath the surface? And this is where we get to the first huge plot twist. The first hidden motive is something the world has gone to war over for 100 years. Black gold. Oil. To really wrap your head around the stakes here, you just need to know this one simple fact. Venezuela is sitting on the #1 largest proven oil reserves on planet Earth. That's more than Saudi Arabia, more than anyone. If you control Venezuela, you control an absolute ocean of oil. And get this, in this narrative, they don't even try to hide the connection. The U.S. doesn't just take out Maduro. It straight up announces it's going to pay for the whole operation by taking control of and selling Venezuela's oil. The country's single most valuable asset is now the prize. So, you see the two competing stories here perfectly, don't you? On one hand, the official line, it's a rescue mission to help a nation in crisis. But on the other hand, what critics in this story claim it is a hostile takeover, plain and simple, designed to seize the oil fields. But believe it or not, the story goes even deeper than that. Because as critical as oil is, it's really just a means to an end. The ultimate goal, the real reason for this entire high-stakes global drama, is about something even more powerful, the US dollar itself. Okay, so this all comes down to something called the petrodollar system. Now, it sounds kind of complicated, but it's really the most important unwritten rule in the world economy. For decades, if any country wanted to buy oil from any other country, they had to do it using US dollars. Think about that. Every country needs oil, which means every country needs dollars. This is what lets the United States run huge deficits and have incredible financial power. It's what makes the dollar king. This table here looks simple, but it explains everything. It doesn't matter if it's Japan buying oil from Saudi Arabia or Brazil buying from Nigeria. The payment has to flow through US dollars. This gives America this incredible power. It makes the US financial system the central toll booth for the world's most important resource, which lets it slap on powerful sanctions and pretty much cut any country off from the global economy. And right here, this is the core of the conflict. Maduro, who was no friend of the U.S., was actively trying to break this #1 rule. He was looking for ways to sell his country's massive oil reserves for other things, like the Chinese yuan, maybe even cryptocurrencies. Now, if the country with the world's largest oil supply starts selling it outside the dollar, the whole system could be at risk. So the action against Maduro suddenly looks like a brilliant 2-for-1 move. First, you seize physical control of all that oil. But second, and way more importantly, you make sure that oil gets sold only for US dollars. You reinforce the rule, you solidify the dollar's power, and you send a very, very chilling message to everyone else. And that message builds into this powerful global warning. Because this was never just about Venezuela. It was a warning shot for every other country watching. And this is the blunt, unspoken message that the whole world is meant to hear. The subtext is crystal clear. If you dare to challenge the supremacy of the dollar, we will consider it an existential threat, and we will meet it with overwhelming force. It's all about maintaining financial control. So, to bring it all home, this story isn't really about one guy or even one country's oil. It's a story about the constant, ruthless fight to keep the US dollar as the undisputed boss of the entire global financial system. The oil is the weapon, sure, but the dollar's the threat. And that leaves us with a pretty provocative question to chew on. Is this framework just a dramatic story to help us understand a really complex system? Or is it a blueprint, a warning of the very real consequences for any nation that dares to challenge the power of the petrodollar?